Hey love, we're going to be continuing math today, doing lesson 22, session 4. This time we are still dealing with line plots, but we're going to be subtracting numbers. So our first problem reads, there are many kinds of dragonflies that are different in length. A scientist measures the lengths of different dragonflies and makes a line plot to show the measurements. What is the difference between the lengths of the longest and the shortest dragonfly? So I first have to figure out what is my longest and shortest dragonfly. Now on the line plot, they give you more numbers than exactly you have a measurement for. Because for example, it starts at 3 and it ends at 5. But if you notice, because you know this already, there are no marks above the 3 or the 5. So while they are the smallest and largest number on the actual plot, it's not the smallest or largest measurement because there is no dragonfly that measures that amount. So therefore that means that the smallest number that has a mark over it is 3 1/4 inches. The largest number that has a mark over it is 4 3/4 inches. Okay, so we're going to take those two largest numbers and we're going to work out our problem. So I went ahead and made myself an equation because you know I love to do that. So I have longest minus shortest equals my answer, right? And then I plug in what I know. I know that my longest number with a mark above it is 4 3/4. Ta-da! My smallest number with a mark above it is 3 1/4. Ta-da! And then I went through and I listed my steps because I don't want to get away from this because I know that this is handy. I have seen you guys be handy with it, so I don't want to let it go. I subtracted my wholes. 4 minus 3 is 1. I'll get back to you, friend. 3/4 minus 1/4 is 2/4 because this is the same as 3 minus 1, which is 2. It is a like denominator. They are the same denominator. You leave them bad boys alone. Therefore, it's 2/4. Now, I come back to my friend up here because I combine step A and step B in step C. So I have 1 plus 2/4 equals 1 2/4 inches. Now, because you are a super smart individual, we're also going to jazz it up some and we are going to simplify. So when I look at 2/4, I see a relationship already. I see that there is a number that can go into both the numerator and the denominator an even amount of times. That number is 2. 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 4 2 times. Therefore, 1 2/4 is the same exact thing as 1 1/2, except this is simplified. This is the best answer. Still not done. I did all this math and equation, but look at all those words. They asked me in a bunch of words. I have to respond in a bunch of words. So my sentence, my response is going to restate the question in the response. So my sentence says, the difference between the lengths of the longest and shortest dragonfly is 1 1/2 inches. Now the next thing that I do is I look on page 480 and I look at how they did it. So same exact problem. They have a picture and model where it's a tape diagram, kind of like we did yesterday. Though I will be honest with you, I prefer to do addition tape diagrams, not subtraction tape diagrams, because you still have to subtract the actual digits anyway. So you may as well just deal with them, in my opinion. If you prefer to do it, then you go on, my love. You do what you do. Secondly, on the very bottom of that page, you will see a model it option, and that's where they use the bunny hop. So you could go and you could draw out a number line, plot line, and you could hop backward until you got to that number and then count how many times you did that. That's totally feasible and workable as well. As I always say, it's up to you. It's based on what your understanding is, based on what you're comfortable is, and more so based on what you can duplicate with getting the correct answer, not just lucking into it. So now we're at the connected part where we are going to break down what we have already done on our initial page. We did a lot of work, a lot of sentences, good stuff. Now we're going to break down our thoughts just so that we make sure that we got it methodically right every step of the way. So it is asking me for my longest dragonfly. Remember that a fraction, you can also do it a slant, and so I did that here. I don't really know why I switch it up, just sometimes, I don't know, your brain does a little bit different, but these are still fractions. Remember that you can do them one on top of the other, or that you can do them at a slant. So we go back to my chart, and again, 5 is the largest number. That is indeed true. However, there is nay a mark right here. There is no mark right there. So therefore, the largest number on my line plot that has measurements is 4 3/4 inches. So I wrote 4 3/4 inches. Using that same logic, I'm going to go over here and find the smallest number. Yes, 3 is the smallest number, but there's no measurement, so that does not apply. My smallest number is 3 1/4 inches. So I wrote that down. Ta-da! Moving on to number 2. Number 2 asks me to write an expression that can be used to find the difference between the two lengths. So it tells me difference, that's a hint. I know that if something is different, I am subtracting, therefore my answer will be smaller than either numbers that I have. Also, an expression, as we have discussed, does not have an equal sign. So an expression is just my arithmetic, no equal sign, no actual math. So this is what we write for number 2. 4 3/4 minus 3 1/4. Number 3 tells me to look at the modelet. It tells me to look at the modelet and explain how I could use the number lines with arrows to find the difference between the two lengths. So rather doing the straight arithmetic way and rather than doing the tape diagram way, it's asking you to do the bunny hop way, right? So what I would do is the number line is divided into fourths, right? It goes down or up by a fourth, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 4, etc., etc. Each hop to the left, so each little time that I went bloop, bloop, bunny, bunny, over to the left, I would be subtracting. Remember, to the left, my number gets smaller. To the right, my number gets larger. So every hop to the left would mean that I subtract by 1/4 every time. And the reason for that is because, as we said, it's split into a fourth every time. So how many times do you hop by, though, you might be asking me or yourself. So if you go up here, you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? There are 5 marks. If you add how many marks are on 4 3/4 and 3 1/4, because those are the two numbers we identified are the largest and the smallest. So if you count those together, that's how many times you hop. So we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But you have to count the number that you're already on. So remember that first hop doesn't really count. So it's like bloop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's why technically there are 6 hops, but 5 marks if you add those two together. So again, that's because the first one doesn't really count. It's like to get you off of start, essentially. So it's just like bloop, hop, 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 5 times. Okay. So for number 6, I'm going to use this chart of dragonfly lengths, okay? And number 6 asks me to use the line plot above, right there. What lengths are the greatest number of dragonflies? What lengths are the least number of dragonflies? What is the difference between the two lengths? 1, I need to ask myself, how many questions these people just asked me? I see 1 question mark, 2 question mark, 3 question mark. Therefore, I need to have 3 responses, okay? So let's do one at a time. It asks me what length are the greatest number, not what is the greatest length. So you must be very careful about reading and interpreting your question and what it's actually asking you. So what length are the greatest number is a confusing way of saying what length has the most measurements, has the most dragonflies. Well, I go up to my line plot and I can count them, or I can use my little eye. So I see 2, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I see 2, I see 3, I see 2, I see 1, I see 3. I know, in knowing what number is larger, that 5 is larger than any of these, so therefore the largest number of length must be 4.5 inches. So I went ahead and I said my question within my answer, and I said the greatest number of dragonflies are 4.5 inches long. This little quotes here, kind of like when we were doing quotation marks, that means inches. It's just a little cheat, and I don't know, English is kind of full of those. I'm sure all languages have theirs, but obviously I only know this one. Now, additionally, they asked me for the least number of dragonflies. So again, I'm going to go back up to my chart, and it's a weird way of asking me which measurement has the smallest amount, has the least amount of measurements. Well, only one of them has 1, so therefore my answer must be 3.5. I restate my question within my response. The least number of dragonflies is 3.5 inches long. Now it asks me, what is the difference between those two lengths? You can do mental math, I'm sure, but I just went ahead and followed our steps just so that we wouldn't lose them. So 4.5 minus 3.5, that's my original problem. 4 minus 3 is 1. Then I go to, that's step A. Step B is to subtract the fractions only. So 1/2 minus 1/2 is 1 minus 1 over 2, which is 0 over 2. Now this has come up a few times. 0 over 2 is not a real number. So please do not include that in any answer that you have, because 0 over any number in the world, even if this was a bazillion, gazillion, and 5, with over 0 on top of it as the numerator, the answer would be 0, okay? So 0 always trumps everything. 0 is an interesting, tricky fish in that way. It has a lot of rules, and one of the things is it's pretty much just always going to win. So do not do this as a fraction, because this is not a real number. This is a made-up number. Please do not put that in your responses. So now what I do is I treat this as a 0, because that's what it is. And step C says to combine A and B together. So 1 plus 0 is 1. Therefore, the difference between the two is 1 inch. Ta-da! And lastly, problem number 7. Problem number 7 says the line plot below shows the length of pieces of ribbon. So it originally did not have any of these little notches, obviously in my handwriting, written in. It only had 12, 11, and 10. Now I went through, and because I could count them into eighths, I knew that it must obviously be chunked into eighths, because there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is a whole, right? So I just went through and I labeled my fractions. So now it's asking me the actual problem, work it out problem, is saying Terry's piece of ribbon is 1 5/8 shorter than the longest piece of ribbon, which is why I wanted to label it up here, because I needed to know the actual accurate measurement of the longest piece of ribbon. Again, yes, there is 12 on this chart, but 12 is not the longest piece of ribbon measurement, because 12 does not have a mark over it. However, 11 7/8 does. So I needed to identify that 11 7/8 was my longest piece, and then I just went through and I did the straight math like it told me to. So 11 7/8 minus 1 5/8. Step A is to subtract the wholes. 11 minus 1 is 10. Then I subtract the fractions. 7/8 minus 5/8 is the same as 7 minus 5 over 8. I leave those denominators alone because they are like, and I don't do anything with them. 7 minus 5 is 2, so 2/8. I combine step A and step B together, so I have 10 and 2/8. However, I notice a relationship between those numbers. I notice a number, when simplified, that can go into both my numerator and my denominator. That number is 2. So 2 goes into 2 1 time, 2 goes into 8 4 times. Therefore, my final simplified answer, 10 and 2/8, is the same exact thing as 10 and 1/4. They asked me in words, I respond in words. Terry's piece is 10 and 1/4 inches. That's it, guys. You did it. You did great. Please make sure that you pause where necessary, rewind where necessary, do your homework. You've got this, you smarty.